All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. It's top of the hour. I don't know if the four is Pete, Mark, Jeff, and one other. I'm not quite sure, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully, all of you who are joining today via recorded session or live will get something out of this. I want to say thanks specifically to Mark Lund on the record. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate this and the time just to get to chat with you. So today's session is removing barriers and involving stakeholders. And the quick scoop, Mark Lund and I have gotten to chat a lot. I work out of Spokane at ESD 101. I'm the secondary math coordinator currently. And Mark and I go back, it seems like forever now, working on math curriculum and working together on some big projects. And this has been a great conversation we've had. And I asked Mark to join us, if he would, and just share his story of what's been going on at Glover, how he's been thinking about these barriers and removing barriers so that teachers can do the work that they need to do, and how do you involve the stakeholders. So Mark, give us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I've been at Glover, just finished my 5th year there. So 4th year as principal, first year I came in as an assistant principal. So I think I've been in education like 14, 15 years. So I started as a math teacher in Spokane Public Schools and then went the administrative route. And yeah, love the work, love what I'm doing. Love taking care of staff at Glover and seeing them do amazing things for our kids and community.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so you got the story, and I'm curious because what you're doing is pretty different from what I hear at different schools, et cetera. So as we're thinking about our time together today, we want to hear from your story, and we're going to do just a general interview format. I'm thinking as the interviewer, Mark, I'm thinking about these things like, how do we dismantle barriers and how do we create structures to really involve people, the stakeholders who are really important? And along the way, what are some specific solutions that we can do that really position our stakeholders, whether that's community members or our teachers, whoever that might be, as really capable? How do we do that? And so I'm going to keep my mind around those outcomes. And along the way, from the conversations that you and I have had, it's been really good to think about the principles of engagement, work that I've been doing as well in Mathland, and thinking about equity and how do we do this. And there's these three things that keep coming to the surface. And as you mentioned, bringing stakeholders and positioning them as capable, that resonates with me, is thinking about how do we position each as capable, each teacher, each parent, each kid, each other as capable, and how do we enhance each other's identity and agency, and how do we value multiple contributions? So I'm going to be thinking about that as we go through our interview, but really it's your story. So I want to hear, and we want to hear from you. So the background, what's Glover? Where is Glover? Tell us about Glover Middle School.
Yeah, so Glover Middle School is a 7-8 middle school, roughly 600 students, just about 80% free and reduced. So you've got some of the stats up there. 30.6% of our students met math standards in the 18-19 school year. The growth stats are kind of reflected in that lower left corner. So we see high math growth and we see high ELA growth. But when we think about proficiency as related to standard, we know we still have work to do, and there's always going to be work to do. And right now we're really kind of leaning into how do we produce an experience at Glover that kids feel authentically connected to, instead of just an experience that just runs whether I'm there or not. So we're really leaning into that connection and how we can start to modify our programming and the way that we do instruction at Glover, so that we're personalizing it for our students and moving beyond differentiation. Right? There's a few ways I can teach this, but really going, how do we personalize this for our students? Because we know each and every student is worth it, right? They deserve to have dignity. They deserve to have hope, and that's our job to get them there and to make them feel hopeful. So we are doing some things differently, and I'm excited about it, man. And it's crazy, it's different, but we're doing them together as a staff, which is really special.
That's awesome. You gave me this graphic here. This is from a couple years ago. What's this super cool bar graph stuff here? 3D
yeah,
style.
So I had a chance to come to Glover in the 16-17 school year. That was an ask of central office. I was an administrator at another building, but Glover was in a place where there were just struggles with school culture and climate. And staff and students feeling safe. So this was just some of the staff data coming in with those blue bars, just rating the overall effectiveness of the restorative practices, or students being held accountable for their behavior, or just staff feeling safe. So some of those preliminary numbers were in blue there. Over the course of that first semester at Glover, we definitely were able to make a shift there, and because we know, right, culture sets the stage, climate sets the stage for anything to happen, right? Like, and even when you have great things happening despite culture and climate, they're not necessarily sustainable. So we had to get in and do the work and figure out what people needed and how to support them. And we really entered that conversation knowing and believing we had everybody on staff that we needed to have on staff. And you can advance to the next slide, Jeff. So it was a belief when we started there that it wasn't about not having the right people in place. It was around, we need to really carefully examine the ways that we are supporting our teachers, because we know that they are holding up our students. So we made some adjustments, and there were some dramatic shifts. This graphic here, you see school climate, leadership, and professional learning. This is done through the Panorama survey that Spokane Public Schools participates in. And for the last 4 years now, Glover Middle School has really been a statistical anomaly. We've been an outlier as it relates to those 3 categories. So when you look at urban middle schools with high free and reduced rates, Glover Middle School sits in the top 1% for staff perception data around climate leadership and professional learning. And for me, I really think climate and leadership really are the catalyst to that really good professional learning. Because when people don't feel safe, they don't feel valued or cared for, it's really hard to get after that professional learning. So one of the things that I put on here was just this graphic, this new support thing that's on the right-hand side. So over the last few years, and this isn't the focus of this presentation, but 2 colleagues and myself designed and wrote an app around student services at primary and secondary schools. And that was a game changer. It changes the way in which we can serve staff, right? So for a staff member to go in and use this app and say, hey, Johnny needs to see the counselor, and they click Johnny and they click the button and it's sent. All of a sudden now notification is sent to the counselor, and this kind of to-do item sits in the counselor's queue of their work. And when the counselor goes in and meets with the student, they're able to resolve that. And there's this automatic communication that gets sent back to the teacher. So
you're not waiting for a bunch of emails to come through from the teachers to respond to get to the counselors and connect to people.
Yeah, you'd like reply all this, reply all that. Like, I knew in the beginning, it was just very evident that people had needs that needed to be met. They needed support, right? And if you can't bring the kind of anxiety level and stress level down of the staff that you serve, right? If they're sitting up here, like, it's not healthy to sit in that elevated state. So it's about being able to support and bring people down. And that app that we built was huge. So if there's an emergency, right, teacher presses a button, there's this customized team and everyone gets notified. So I get a text message, I get an email, right? And then when we resolve something, there's an automatic email that's sent back to teachers. So it's a flexible tool, and it's served us really well for, instances when there's an emergency or support's needed at the classroom door, or, there's a food insecurity and we need to support a student and a family with that.
I really like how you're using this tool, and your team helped build it, and you helped build it because you needed it from, I'm going to use language of these principles of engagement. You really wanted to position your teachers as capable and your counselors as capable. And that was removing you from the unneeded conversation and giving them the tool to connect, whether that's a system that's through Microsoft Teams. I know you all use Microsoft in your system, but some way to be able to connect and get the other stuff out of the way, use the right tools to get the stuff done. And that really seems to position your teachers and your counselors as capable of dealing with the issues that need to be dealt with, instead of waiting in some long email string. Like, I'm waiting.
Yes. Yeah. And we went through so many iterations of that, right? It was send an email, and then it was like, oh my gosh, we could build a PDF that you could like fill out, and that's going to be awesome. Well, you email that PDF now to 4 people, and now you're going to do a reply all, and you're not sure who's resolved it or who's on their way, or maybe you build something in Microsoft Forms, right? But then there's no way to go in and append the record, and let them know, hey, somebody has responded to this, and here's what the follow-up action is. So we
Mm-hmm.
just took
Mm-hmm.
all of that and we automated it into a really customizable process. And now we've actually built some automated systems to where maybe you notice, hey, Johnny needs some hope today because I'm seeing signs of loneliness. And so we built out the tool so that teacher Johnny clicks a button and his teachers are automatically notified, hey, if you see Johnny today, like give him a little bit of extra love, right? So trying to extend that down kind of into that tier one. How
Yep.
do we
Yep.
serve each other and serve students, not just at the level of, hey, Johnny's in trouble and he needs somebody to come to the classroom or he needs to use counselor, but even before that, right? So mechanisms to celebrate students or mechanisms to, uplift kids when we notice that they need hope. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, so I got the feel, the background. Glover, you came in a few years ago. You're working with really trying to help the climate for the teachers, the educators, and your crew really feeling like this is a good place to be. I have leadership. I know what to do, professional learning, and we can really tackle the issues. And you're at a school at Glover. And what's your free and reduced lunch numbers again?
We're just under 80%. So
Okay, so just under 80%. And your math and ELA, I look at the math scores and you're like, yeah, you're at 37% on your state testing. It's not necessarily rock star, but you're working with your kids and your teachers are giving this feedback that it's the right place and it's the culture and the leadership, the climate and the professional learning, it's in the right place. Yeah. So with that, I'm thinking, okay, so what's the story of dealing with where you are all at in the last little bit, in particular through COVID, which just happened to land on you, as many of us it did, at the wrong time or the right time. So give us the story. What's going on? And I'm going to try to ask some questions again to keep back to those principles so I can be mindful and we can be mindful. What is it we can walk away? And again, those details. So those of us who are joining, I see our numbers are up more now. This is Mark Lund from Glover Middle School in Spokane, Washington, and his story of really helping to remove barriers and position stakeholders as capable. So what was the scoop?
Yeah, so when COVID came about, we made a decision collectively as a staff to see it as an opportunity to move education forward, right? So it wasn't something that was being done to us, something that was happening to us. We had to take this, constraint and actually see it as an affordance, right? So we have this affordance, and I'm not trying to be insensitive when I say that, right? We just have a decision to make, right? Are we going to see this as something that's going to dismantle us? Or are we going to see this in a way where we actually can leverage it as an affordance? So we go the affordance route. We go, all right, the game's different, right? Students are one-to-one with technology. We seem to have solved this kind of broadband internet shortage. We've got students who are connected. They've got machines. They are connected. How does that change the game when we launched into distance learning? And also, we have a real focus on equity. And so, Spokane Public Schools, put together a really thoughtful and thorough equity resolution. But moving a step beyond that, it's like how do you bring it off of the paper and start to bring that to life? And so there was a section of the equity resolution that talked about advancing equitable student-centered learning by providing cultural connections to curriculum, student agency, project-based learning, and competency-centered structures for grading, course completion, and advancement. All right, so long story. We enter COVID. We're thinking about these affordances that we have. We're thinking about, this charge to advance equitable student-centered learning. And as we drove into distance learning, we very early on leveraged asynchronous learning, right? So we said, all right, as students attend these live sessions, what if they were attended in a way where it was the teacher's presence and their role was as a guide and as a facilitator? So what if we went all in on building out asynchronous content that could be accessed independent of the teacher, and then teacher actually shifted into the role of guide and as mentor? Right. So we started to toy with that idea. We assembled a staff development team around this, around these principles, right? Like, all right, we're going to build out content asynchronously so that we're going to put teachers in position to do what they do best, right? They're artists. They are relationship gurus with kids. And if they're tied to that, hey, great to see you kids, take out your notes, let's go, right? You are not flexing any of those kind of artistic muscles around building relationships and helping students feel feel connected. So we went all in on distance learning with asynchronous content and reframing the role of teacher as coach and as mentor. And that started to unlock some things for us, right? We started to see this decoupling of teacher and content delivery. And we've seen it a little bit before. We've played with it through, what was it? It's been called like the flipped classroom. Right? So there's some notions of that in there as well. But we've had the flipped classroom, but we've never had this type of access, right? And we've never been able to leverage technology in this way. So as that worked, we brought together staff development teams, and we had staff build out. If you go to slide 12, Jeff, let's see.
I don't know the numbers on here.
Go to the next slide after that.
All right. Oh, the one with all the goodies.
Yeah, there we go. So we started with this Glover On Demand 1.0. And so the on-demand concept came from, I suppose we ripped it off from Comcast a little bit, but this notion of kind of on-demand content, right? If you built things out in this way, shifted the role of teacher and a student's kind of going through a menu of options, what could we do? What could we produce? So we've got a framing document that's listed there. And we also have a what teachers built. And it's pretty simple, but it was a school-wide kind of lesson format that teachers were able to leverage. And we had this select group of teacher leaders kind of build out the how-to guide. So if you just open up the what teacher.
So I'm going to open that up, and I got to do a different tab. But while I do that, Mark, why did you say it's what teachers built, and why don't you say what we built? I'm just curious because you use your language really carefully there.
Yeah, I mean, such a critical component of this is this notion of human-centered design, right? You can't, like, quite often we go out and we design things for people, right? And if you're not going to involve something in the process, like this notion of I'm going to design it for you, it just doesn't resonate with me. You've got to bring teachers together at the design table, right? And there's so much knowledge and wisdom that each one of our teachers have. Sometimes it's just about putting the right questions in front of teachers or thinking about it as like putting the right design constraints in front of teachers. So we framed it up at the beginning, right? And so like one of those design constraints was around the shift in teacher role and leveraging asynchronous content. So we said, all right, if we look to shift the role of teacher, if we look to really lean into asynchronous content, if we look to really prioritize the social emotional well-being of our students such that when we do get to actually see them live, we're not saying, hey, everybody, let's start taking notes. If we're really going to do that, we work to position teachers to start building out what that product was going to be. So, it's kind of like, you start to ask the questions are the toughest piece, right? It's getting started and building that first prototype. So the question of what would it really look like to position students as capable in a way where they could start to access content on demand and leverage their teacher as a mentor and a coach? What would that look like?
So, okay, I want to stop right there. Tell me more about why you say that would be positioning your students as capable. Capable of what? And tell me more about positioning them as capable.
Yeah, I mean, capable of owning their education, of being an active participant, of closing the achievement gap, right? It's like, so often it's like, well, you're deficient here, so let's give you an extra math class. And then let's give you this. And then let's give you this. And it's just like, you just cram it all in instead of like, what if I position a student? What if I actually help them develop the skills to be an independent learner, right? And when we exercise that skills as adults, right? I finished my basement, right? I did the electrical, maybe I shouldn't have said that. I did the framing as well, but I was positioned as capable because I knew I could, right? I could go to YouTube, right? I could learn how to use this tool. I could learn how to wire an outlet. I could call my friend Jeff, who I know has built a house before, but I was positioned as capable because I knew how to access the resources around me to get me where I needed to go. And I think within education, it's been, well, you're deficient here. Let's give you an extra class here. Well, the extra class, like, yeah, it's going to cram a couple more skills down your throat, but does it actually further position you as a capable learner for future endeavors? Like, no, you actually you might know a couple more things. You reaffirm the fact that you hate school and, suddenly Monday turns into Tuesday and we rinse and repeat.
So speaking of that rinse and repeat and that stacking of things, I was thinking that first principle of position each as capable okay, I'm going to position you as capable. And what I'm hearing is that asynchronous learning, instead of the stand and deliver, a lot of teacher volume coming there, you're saying you're giving the kids access and saying, we're going to make sure that you can get the things that you need to get. And then second, when you said rinse and repeat and what the kids feel like, if we put on that type of class you were talking about earlier, and then we just keep telling them, well, you're not able to do it. You're not able to do it. Let me save you. Let me do it.
Mm-hmm.
Then that second principle of engagement I think of is, how do you enhance the identity and agency of each learner in this case? What you're talking about, Mark, is their identity is they're a learner and that they can do it, rather than, sorry, you can't do it. Let me just put you in the slow. And by the way, we know none of us can really do it here. None of that kind of talk, but you're enhancing their identity that they are actually the learner, and you're giving them a chance to express that. Okay, now which of these things are you going to access and which things are you going to do? And give it, flex it. Like what you're saying with home building or working on that, like not only are you not calling the contractor for it, you're just like, okay, I got to figure it out with YouTube and these tools. And then you can grow that identity and express your identity on how you're doing your things.
Yeah. And you can't grow identity if you don't give choice. Right? And so this notion of, for us, that shift of personalization, actually within our strategic learning framework, we link to it later, we make a pretty bold statement, right? And we being our collective staff. We know that in a class of 30 students, there are 30 different stories, levels of confidence, and levels of understanding. We reject the idea that a single adult can or should attempt to bring all 30 humans on the same journey, learning the same thing in the same way at the same time. Leveraging technology as co-teacher and fundamentally leveraging the tools of the 21st century impacts equity in education in the way that the first iPhone on June 29th of 2007 impacted personal communication. Technology can never replace a caring and passionate teacher. Learning is a community-oriented human endeavor. We are social beings who learn from one another. A classroom accessed from anywhere, populated with humans and technology, can be designed to leverage the strengths of each. Let us offload content delivery so we can make more time to be humans together with our students.
So that notion of really leveraging the identity of each individual and that uniquity of each individual, was that just a student thing or was that a teacher thing? I'm trying to make sure I heard that right.
It was simultaneously both, actually, right? Like, so if you're going to put teachers in position to enhance the identity of your students, you can't do it in a directed way to a teacher that says, this is what you must do, right? It's counterproductive.
So you're both positioning teachers as capable while you want them to position students as capable. You're enhancing the identity and agency of your teachers while you're enhancing identity and agency of students. Because if you don't do it at both levels, it doesn't seem to make sense.
Well, and it's the teachers that unlock it for the students, right? They unlock and they enhance the identity of their students. Now, in administrators, when we dream up things, we're like, oh my gosh, this is going to enhance the identity of our students, right? We're going to run this special program and do this special thing, right? Like, you're right over the top of the teacher and you're coming in and playing hero, right? Like, that's not the way to do it. Like, that enhancement happens through teachers. And so really, when I thought about this presentation, as you and I continue to discuss, I think quite often we place barriers in the way of our teachers, right? And like, they're the ones who are going to unlock it for our kids. And we have to enhance the identity of our teachers. We have to position teachers as capable if they're going to unlock that for students. So
tell me more about the barriers that were in play. And I'm going to go to your doc link that you have all here, and I can try to pull up any of the things. And again, anybody who's watching, the link is in the chat there. If you want to grab any of these links, they should all be available. Type something in the chat if, for example, it's not available. And for a reminder, for those who are interested, at the end, we're going to give about 15 minutes of Q&A specifically, so you can ask more details from Mark about what happened there. But Mark, this notion of positioning your teachers as capable and there were barriers.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Like, how did you, what were the barriers and how did you overcome them or remove them, or what did you do with the barriers? And how did that tie into this positioning each of your teachers as capable and enhancing the identity and agency of each teacher?
Yeah. So when I think about the larger staff and positioning them as capable, that kind of what teachers built link right there. That was that links to a document that was one of the outcomes of this work, right? And so we had this teacher leader team of 8 over that summer going into distance learning. build out professional development. Setting up a team within Microsoft, because we wanted all of our students there to be a consistent feel when you went into your third period math class and your sixth period social studies class. So how do you set up a team? Now, these links I'll tell you here, Jeff, where it says begin training, those aren't going to be active links.
Because that's your internal for
an introduction to OneNote, right? So the team built that out, right? And we framed it up as like the assignment within Teams was actually the asynchronous lesson that lived in OneNote. And so the student had this kind of fillable assignment that was in their OneNote. And so the teacher could actually kind of watch their progress as they produced that. So I'd watch live sessions of teachers and I'd hear silence for a while, which I'm not going to panic. And then I would hear one of our awesome science teachers, Shane Doyle, be like, "Oh my, Jeremy, your answer to number 3, that's awesome. Have you considered da 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 da?" And I know what Shane's doing is Shane actually has his machine up and he is in Johnny's notebook and he's watching what Johnny's typing there, right? So he has positioned Johnny as capable. He's able to access the content, and then Shane is there providing him feedback, right? Providing him encouragement.
Okay. Make sure I'm catching this. So science teacher is online with kids because this is the middle of COVID when you're fully distanced.
Yep.
The microphone is quiet because the kid's working on a document in the kid's notebook.
Yeah, the kids, 24 of them ish.
Yeah. And so the teacher's just watching that stuff, but it's kind of like a work time in class, effectively. Yep. So the kids are doing it. So I'm coming back to what you said earlier, because I grew up with and know totally too well that easy, just stand and deliver, stand and lecture. That doesn't necessarily grow kids, and it doesn't position them as capable. But this, putting the kids and trusting them that they're going to actually fill in their notebook and put the stuff in there, then as a teacher, the science teacher could watch what was happening and see and really then cultivate that identity and agency of each learner. Yeah.
Well, there was such a hurdle there to cross, because it was like, well, what if they're not capable?
Oh,
So
like, did you have barriers with that you saw?
Definitely. And they were all like, they're well-intentioned, right?
Well,
like
what kind of barriers? What would they like?
Well, I think just a mental hurdle for people, right? Like, wait a second, like I'm a really good presenter. Like I can teach that, like I teach this really well. But now I don't get to do my thing. Right. And so we had teachers, honestly, they're reflecting on it going, wait a second, it's not about me. Right. And I'm never going to say that to a teacher, right? Like, you're going to make somebody feel like crap. Right. So if somebody gets that realization, like, that's a healthy realization, right? And they go, oh, it's not about me. Like, it's what my kids need. And we had teachers going, hey, if Johnny does his work, I actually don't care if he joins the live session. Is that okay? I'm like, seems great to me. Like, what does attendance mean to you? Now, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I guess I don't care, right? Yeah. Like, what does attendance mean to you? Like, go for it, right? If that's what Johnny needs, like, and he's crushing it, that's great. And so teachers had to let go of some of that. There was almost like some guilt, right? Because you're like, well, I'm going to leverage technology, but I used to do these things. What am I supposed to do now? Like, well, you're a coach, right? You're a curator. You're going to go out and find resources. Like, Khan Academy does some stuff really well. Like, you think you can do it better? I mean, I guess if you can, do you have the time to do it better, right? And you're not always going to be there for Johnny. Khan Academy actually probably is, right? And so if you can let him leverage those skills, develop those skills to learn from and with a tool like that, then you're building this actually primary skill set of being an independent learner who now has the ability to close the achievement gap, right? Because you don't have to sit and wait for somebody else to get the information. You can actually go out and you can own it. And that's scary.
And you're talking about 7th and 8th graders doing this.
Yeah, they crushing it, man. Crushing it, right? And did we have students who failed to engage? Yeah. Right. Did we have students before that failed to engage? Yeah. And we didn't give up on them, right? We just keep working at it. Right. Like, and that's not a school specific problem, right? We all have probably adult friends who are failing to engage in something they need to engage in, right? Like, just push them to the side. But it's a reality.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so I'm going to share this again. We've got, thank you again for the docs on this. I really appreciate that. We're seeing lots of the details people get in the slide deck. It's there posted in the chat on the side. You're welcome to grab it and see any of those links. Mark, I'm also curious about the framework. You talked about this framing thing. Let me see if it's, yeah. The strategic learning framework. Yes. What's this thing? And was this like what you started with when you were going into COVID, or where were we at? I remember.
No, we didn't start with this. So we started to chip away at this and really think, how could we reimagine the delivery, right? This design of delivery. And I said asynchronous content, and then you had distance learning, which actually then, as it rolls into hybrid learning, and you've got subgroup A and subgroup B, and we actually just applied the same principles. So, okay, what about now when kids come to school on a hybrid in-person day? What if you were just there to coach them, mentor them, give them feedback? What if you still didn't go back to the old, hey, let's go ahead and take out your notes and start? What if you didn't go back? And so we tried it, and it was successful. So it was this perfect series of events, right? Where it's like this strong culture. We feel good about where we're at. Let's practice it in distance learning. Let's actually now further develop and practice it in hybrid learning. And so when we get there and we start to find success there, we start to unfold this strategic learning framework, which was visioning ahead to this next school year. It said, if we applied everything we learned right now, how could we reimagine a learning framework? And so really 4 of the pillars within that learning framework were made
before the pillars. My brain is like hooked in wondering, when you went back to hybrid, like sometimes in person and not fully remote, you're saying that the principles that you were trying when your teachers were doing remotely, refreshing, positioning each kid as capable by giving them the tools, the links, whether it's Khan Academy and other things, and space, so that they could do the work that they needed to do, enhancing their identity as a learner who's capable and can do these things and problem solve, and enhancing their agency, how they express that. Did you see barriers when you came back to the school in the classroom? Because I know my song and dance that I would like to do in the classroom that I wouldn't be able to do online, I might want to go right. I mean, I'm just guessing that would be a barrier for Jeff. Did you have other barriers with your teachers or with students?
I don't know. I think we had some that people had to work through. It was actually convenient that we came back hybrid and not full on face-to-face, because hybrid made it harder to revert back to what we had always done. Right? Because if you went back to what you always had done, then you've got these A-B cohorts, and you're suddenly like, oh, what day is it? Like, who has B gotten this lesson? Or not? So there were some natural incentives there, and again, a perfect kind of practicing grounds right there. And so that really, from the onset, took some of those barriers out of play, because it was actually easier to come into hybrid and continue to kind of explore around this asynchronous realm than it was to go back, right? And anytime you're going to grow, what is inflammation is a necessary condition for adaptation, right? That's true. It's got to be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not a go hard every day kind of inflammation, right? You can actually kind of outdo it, overdo it, and suddenly you're not going to grow. And so hybrid was this just a step up, right, in a way for us to practice it there. So and so then once we started to unlock this as a staff, like, what if the teacher didn't have to own the content delivery? What if we could leverage technology? How would that change the way we did inclusion, right? Because when you think about inclusion, it's like, and maybe people do it through co-teaching, but you're still like, okay, if we eliminate the resource classes now within this kind of general education course, I've got, I already feel like I have a spectrum of needs to be met. Well, now if we eliminate the resource class, now like this further spectrum, right? Like, how am I going to do this? Well, if you've kind of been able to kind of take yourself as that content delivery, individual, and remove yourself from that role and be the coach, be the mentor, suddenly it opens the door to put students in the least restrictive environment and tackle inclusion. right? Because you're not going to go up there and give 3 different lectures in class, right? Now, what inclusion turns into is you're co-designing, right? If I'm a special education cert, I'm co-designing with my math cert teacher, right? With my ELA cert teacher, and we want to provide those interventions in real time. And some of them obviously unfold asynchronously. So our staff started to vision this and go, I actually can start to envision inclusion because we're already on a pathway that feels like personalized learning is accessible, where previously it was like personalized. I'm having trouble differentiating. Like you want to go a step, you want to go like actually upstream of this thing and talk personalization. Like I'm not ready to have that conversation, right? I can't even, like figure out how to do this piece. So that unlocked inclusion, right? But play out inclusion on the other end of the spectrum, right? You've got inclusion, but you also have this like accelerated honors track, which we know at middle school, the door is just closed for students often and early, right? You're not smart enough. You're not gritty enough. You don't have enough persistence, right? Like all that crap. So we close the door because, hey, you didn't make it to the honors English class because you weren't in the top 30 or whatever it was. Like, what if like specially designed instruction plays out on top of general education? What if honors played out on top of general education in the same way? What if honors was like you had these kind of extension experiences that were maybe a bit more abstract and kind of, again, generally built out asynchronously, but teachers there as a guide and facilitator? What if we did that with honors? Well, we did. And we actually eliminated honors tracking at Glover Middle School. Now, that doesn't mean that a student can't receive honors credit for a course. So like a seventh grader comes in, takes a math class. That math class is personalized. We're going to call it Middle School Math 1, the typical 7th grade math class. Well, as that student articulates through that course, right, and has opportunities to be on a personalized pathway and starts to check off these standards. And again, it's not just sitting at a computer all day, right? You're talking about classroom discussions and projects as well. But this 7th grader works through this progression, and let's say by the end of their 7th grade year, they finish this progression, which would have traditionally been encapsulated in our accelerated course. We just go back on the transcript and change the course code from Middle School Math 1 to accelerated, right? Because they've met the requirements. And similar for ELA, right? What is the honors experience? Well, like it's these additional abstract things. And I think I have a placeholder in the presentation for this, but it's not a compaction of standards. It's this kind of extra set of applications on top of the current standards that students would perform and demonstrate, so they would receive that distinction.
So if I'm hearing you right, the honors opportunities are for all students if they want to.
Yep.
Which I'm thinking about these principles of engagement. You're positioning each learner as capable that in whatever this math class is, like the 7th grade math class, that every student is capable of honors. You don't have to be in the separate honors class, but you can do it in here. And you know what? If your identity, we can enhance your identity. You being an honors student, an honors designation, you get to express who you are, and you know exactly what you need to do. But it's within your regular quote unquote class. It's not a separation or segregation of students. Then you're providing the opportunity. Hence, I would say you would position and have positioned each student as capable, because then they all have that opportunity to grow.
Yeah. No, and it was that's exactly right. And so it wasn't about eliminating honors. It was actually about like expanding the opportunity. And they're two very different things, right? Because we want to make sure every student, every child that comes to school has an opportunity to get exactly what they need, right? It has an opportunity to be met where they're at and to grow. And we know students show up on, all levels of that continuum across standards, and we need to provide all students opportunity to move forward and stretch themselves. And I mean, the market only exists at the high school level for these organizations to come in and help you identify the misidentified students who should be in accelerated classes, because we're screwing it up previously down the line. So like, what if we went upstream and stopped screwing it up, right? Not that we were intentionally doing that, but like, what if we actually went upstream and said, like, how would we solve that there? And not to say it's solved, but we're excited for the exploration, and our teachers are excited. And we've got work to continue building that out.
So you're working on fleshing this out in more detail this next school year, but you got the school-wide inclusion, expanding honors opportunities and eliminating tracking. But and you mentioned this earlier, tell me more about eliminating attendance as a barrier, because your team came up with this strategic learning framework to really position all of the learners, all of the students and teachers as capable, to enhance everyone's identity and agency and value multiple contributions. So what about attendance? Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, you think about all the barriers that exist for students, and at Glover, with being nearly 80% free and reduced, we know that quite often when our students miss school, it's not that they want to miss school, right? Like they're at home and they're helping their family in different ways, babysitting their little brother or their little sister, or maybe their mom is sick and they can't come to school that day, and leaning back into this kind of asynchronous piece, right? If teacher isn't the sage on the stage, and we start to build things out in a way where they're accessed in this on-demand fashion, like what would stop a student from being able to access that learning opportunity from home? Now, I'll say, I think school should be a place that enhances the experience for a student.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's why you go to school, right? Like, is to have that experience enhanced. But I don't think going to school should be a necessary condition on being able to gain access to the learning experience itself. I recognize that that's complicated, and what's the definition of attendance and all of that. But we really wanted to work to eliminate attendance as a barrier, and through maintaining that asynchronous content and a belief that school is a place to enhance the experience, not be the limiting factor on, you must be here. We've been able to kind of vision that out and tackle that. Because it actually had to be the case. If you were going to tackle inclusion, expanding honors, eliminating attendance as a barrier is actually, it was going to be an outcome. Or I guess you could flip it the other way, right?
What were your teachers saying as they were developing this framework, especially around the attendance issue? And I'm thinking about their COVID experiences, and then in the hybrid, in the midst of all of that, what was their insights to that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a drawn out process, because it came through that Glover On Demand, 1.0, and then the Glover On Demand 2.0, and we had such momentum built up around advancing equitable student-centered learning, and a true belief that at Glover we are about all kids. So they were fired up.
That's
right?
cool.
They had ownership in it, because it was one of those, hey, what if we did this? What if we figured out a way to do it? And it wasn't like we're presenting a solution. Here's how we're going to do it. It was we're going to enhance the identity of our teachers and position them all as capable, and they're actually the ones who are going to stand this thing up. And so my job as an administrator is just to work to eliminate the barriers as they pop up.
Doesn't that bother you, though, that it's not going to be perfect or complete?
No, I mean, you look at where we're coming from right now, and you could look at those stats of what was it, a third of our students. Yeah, we have high growth. We do have high growth. There's a lot to be proud of, but so we've got 33.3% high, and that's high math growth, but we still have 30.6% of our students meeting standards. And I know we actually met and presented this strategic learning framework to our school board president, President Haynes, and Nicole Rosenkrantz, who works in the Office of Family and Community Engagement here in Spokane Public Schools. Because we're are we crazy? And then we presented it to him, and we're how do we screw this up? Right? This is what we think, this is what we believe. And President Haynes was by not taking the shot, by not trying it. That's how you fail. And so, when you've got leaders in your community responding in that way, and you get a chance to share that with staff, you're oh my gosh, right?
So not only were you trying to position your teachers as capable, the school board was yeah, we're going to position you and your whole staff as capable. Go for it.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about that trust that somebody else has in you. I'm thinking about the neuroscience and what it does in your brain. And we all have felt that before. Hopefully we've all felt that before. When somebody gives you that opportunity and positions you as capable and puts you in that spot, somebody gives you the keys to the car and puts you behind the wheel to drive, and you're you're going to let me drive this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mark, there's one other bullet that you haven't talked about, and I know it's a real huge component because you're all just built a new building and everything like that. And this last part, interdisciplinary teaming structures, it's not only like in the structures of like how you're organizing these, but it became part of your actual physical structures too, if I remember right. Can you tell us some more about that?
It did. So we open a brand new school building next year, and I think we're probably looking for the document here. We're probably 3 weeks out from taking occupancy. I was actually in it today, had a chance to go do another tour, but having a new building isn't a necessary condition for this, but it certainly impacts the way the work is done. So we have kind of pods of classrooms within our new building. And let me see if I can show you one of those, Jeff. But there are generally 5 classrooms within a pod of classrooms. So I'm going to do a quick share screen. Thanks for bearing with me. All right, share Chrome.
Well, Mark sharing that, I got to hear his idea of notion of like, we want to have teachers together and be working across content areas because kids are the center. So instead of kids going to different places, we want to come to the kids and be centered around the kids. And so not only the teaming structure, but the actual physical structures really bore that out. Okay, Mark, what you got the map here. This is your new building.
So we've got these neighborhoods of classrooms in the new Glover Middle School. So kind of these green areas here. The salmon colored are where our science rooms are. So you don't have like a science wing of the building or a math wing of the building. Each one of these neighborhoods of classrooms, and we'll zoom in on one of them right here. Sorry, Jeff.
No, that's great. So there's science in there.
Yep. And so you've got 5 classrooms within this space, and science is right here. Adjacent to science is a math classroom. And so there's actually all this front-facing stuff is glass right here. So the classrooms open to each other, and then there are some classrooms that actually also open up to the neighborhood itself. So this is like an articulating glass wall right here that opens to the neighborhood. And what we started to kind of play with was this notion of how do you make big feel small, right? When students come from elementary to middle school, it feels like a mini high school. And they're coming from this intimate elementary experience. So we had a building that was built and arranged in a way where you could be interdisciplinary. And we said, what would it take to cohort students to a neighborhood for their kind of 4 core experience: math, science, English, social studies. And also tackle inclusion. So each one of these neighborhoods has what I would call a special education room, but it's not. It's actually just a room that's an extension of the space here. So it has an adjacency to an English classroom or a math classroom, and this wall will stay open. And also this glass wall here will open up. So this kind of special education space actually ends up just becoming an extension of a classroom and an extension of what we call a neighborhood space here.
So the kids can get everything that they need right there in the neighborhood, and all of the teachers and all of the support are for them right there. We're not sending them off. You're not sending them off to another Never Land.
Yep. So it's these 110 students who are, intimately known by these 5 adults that are here, who work with them. And then those teachers actually have freedom and flexibility within their bell schedule. So they know, hey, these 110 students, these 2 periods of the day need to go out to their electives. Now, what we do during the block of time when those students are here is actually entirely up to us, right? Nice. So if Johnny needs some more time in math, and they've got to record accurate attendance, but we've got neighborhoods that are like, well, we're actually all going to see our kids only 4 days a week, not 5 days a week, because we want a 2-hour block with each group of students during the week. So they have agency, right? And you position teachers to be capable. And on top of that, I added at the end of the presentation the framework that we have around instructional coaching, which is really more about instructional support. These additional staff members that help go in and co-teach, that curate, create resources for teachers. They're kind of there as the, hey, I was thinking about this. Like, could you help me build this? Could you get started on this? that kind of a support team. So it's not at all tied to evaluation. And we've actually also pulled it off in a way where, the traditional structure would have teachers scheduled to teach 5 classes during the day. And we've been creative with the way in which we do intervention, and our core teachers will teach 4 classes a day. And so when you're in a neighborhood, you have kind of 2 common preps that align with your team. And then there's some intervention work you do during those prep times as well. So again, but that was, generally the barriers that exist across teaming are around common planning time, right? Like time to meet.
So you found the common planning time by using resources and funds to get them freed up, like on that typical 6-period structure where you would have 1 prep period and 5 classes. You're able to use find funding to get it 2 common prep periods, 4 classes that they're working on. But the intervention and the support they would be doing with students is also in their prep time as well. So they're doing that work as well.
Yeah.
Mark, we're coming to the last little bit here. We want to open, I know, for questions and answers. So we want to open it up to anybody. Pete's on as a moderator. If you want to unmute, that is, you can ask to share your video and audio. You're welcome to do so, or in the chat. You're welcome to go ahead and ask away questions. Mark wanted to be here to ask some questions. And Mark, while we're waiting for that, I want to do a quick recap. Could you give me the short version of what were barriers that you had to remove, and what helped drive you through those?
Yeah, for me personally, I'm pretty quick to come to solutions. Like I'm pretty good on my feet, and that's actually kind of problematic at times as a leader. So I had to learn how to frame up the design constraints and then not present solutions right away. So I myself, I was a barrier. So it was me as a pretty good designer jumping into the solution right away.
Is that when you had to trust your teachers and position them as capable to find the solutions and solve the problems?
Yeah, it was. And it wasn't I never felt like I was driven from a place where I wasn't trustworthy, right? I feel like my intentions were I'm going to go out and figure out what people need and get it for them and build it for them. And really what people need generally is to feel like they belong, is to feel like they're capable. And
when you say people, are you talking about teachers or students?
Teachers, because I know they're going to do that for kids, right? We just often as leaders don't do it for them.
And I know this is something that you and I've talked about before. And by the way, if you have a question, go ahead and feel free to put that in the chat, or Pete, bring somebody to the stage if they're asking. Mark, with this, position your teachers as capable and doing that, it's pretty powerful to think about how you wanted to really let them do that. And it's a struggle to do so, but you know that they have to be doing that, because otherwise they don't feel competent and capable to keep growing, and we get stuck in that rut and we still stay where we are.
Yeah. I mean, we stay with the status quo, right? And it's and then I think the arguments will come in against, right? Well, you're not going to have, you're not going to have consistency. Oh, okay, where's consistency getting us now? Go look at the data, right? And tell me that for, when you generally have students showing up to school who are multiple years behind standard and living in poverty, help me understand how what we're doing right now is working. And help me understand how we're positioning them as capable. And so, yeah. And we really dig in. We use a product called Bloom Sites, which is pretty cool. It kind of digs into the social emotional well-being of students, and we survey them often. But if we're really gonna care about how students feel, right, and their connection to school, we gotta build experiences that manifest greater senses of connection. And I think I get a little triggered too, because we talk about empowering stakeholders, right? Which, yes, it's there's such a tendency to go out and let's collect more data. Let's put out a survey, right? Let's have a listening session. Let's do it. We have a lot of information right in front of us that says there's a need to really personalize learning, right? There's a need to establish structures and systems that make students authentically feel like they belong. I don't think having an additional survey or listening session, right? It's all right in front of us, and your teachers see it, right? They want to be involved in the design process. So it's our way to, our job is to frame it up and put them in position to be awesome, because they're going to be. We just have to put them in position.
And I think really importantly, that last of the 3 principles of engagement, position each as capable, enhancing the identity and agency of each, and then third, valuing multiple contributions. Mark, when you mentioned earlier about problem solving, you like to problem solve and find those solutions. If you were to bring your solution or problem solving stuff to the table, they might feel relieved because it's solved, quote unquote. But it's not as refined as when the teachers are having that buy-in or the students are having that buy-in and they get to share contributions. It's something amazingly powerful because of the way that our brains are different, on how the way that you see things is different than the way I see things. And having those multiple perspectives and contributions creates a better product or better solution, because we can test and push and test and push, and we can see things through each other's eyes that we wouldn't see on our own.
Yeah. Well, and we don't naturally tend to go there, but there's a podcast, might be a Next Big Idea podcast, I'm not sure, but it talks about the Seiko watch factory model. And they had 2 different factories, right? One kind of operated as older brother and one operated as younger brother, but the expectation was that they were different, right? Like the models didn't look exactly the same in these factories, even though they were marching towards the same goals, but they shared the successes and the learnings they had with each other. And that'll play true across our neighborhoods as well, right? It's not going to be kind of a cookie cutter model that gets spread across each neighborhood, right? They're going to be different. We actually want them to be different because we're going to grow more as a community, as we understand, how it plays out and what works well and what doesn't work as well. So when we drive towards that, sometimes that common standard, it actually can kind of get counterproductive. We just have to be aware of that.
Well, Mark, that's a great way to wrap this up. I really appreciate you bringing that to the table, saying even with the Seiko watches, we had the same goal, but we each flex and grow in our own way and come together. And especially with your notion of those neighborhoods, what they do is they're teaming together, and then they get to share with other neighborhoods as they're teaming together. It's like value multiple contributions in the small, and then in a large, and then even like here today, larger collaboration. So I want to say thanks again, Mark, for joining us today, and thanks for putting yourself out there with your teachers and your crew, and thanks for all the great work that you're doing. We applaud you and appreciate it. And again, thanks everybody for joining, and feel free to use the slide deck there for resources. Mark's provides some of those PDFs for us to take a look at later, and his info is in here as well. Thank you. See you all, and hopefully you have a wonderful night. Oh, and don't forget the 4:00 session tonight, keynote speaker, the blind woodworker. That's going to be pretty awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care, man.